welcome everyone. My name is Tessie San Martin. I'm the CEO for FHI 360, and welcome everybody and our panelists to our space as we are convened here for the Second Chance Summit and in observation of Second Chance Month, which is celebrated in the month of April. Second chances, right? They're important because, well, frankly, they're important for all of us, because who can claim that they're perfect, that they never make a mistake, that they always get it right? So we all need second chances. And that's why I think this month is so important, and this particular event and this convening to shine a light on this issue is so important. And we're bringing together, partners from across different disciplines to share with each other experiences, lessons learned, tools, knowledge that we have. Particularly, when we talk about second chances, we're talking about, addressing recidivism, right? And making sure that people who have encountered, been part of, our justice system, when are able to build effective pathways to successful reentry. And that's easier said than done, because there are all kinds of obstacles in the way, all kinds of barriers, and all kinds of stigma. Our society talks a lot about second chances. It's not always great at actually giving them. And so that's why this particular event is so important, and why I'm delighted to have all of you, and that we're recording it. I think that's terrific. We've got a great panel. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot myself. We will also have lunch, so whatever doesn't get addressed now, we're inviting everybody to stay, remain part of the conversation, remain part of the network, this important network of practitioners, academicians, funders, and so on, that are really engaged with this issue. So I think I'm just going to leave it here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to welcome all of you. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lisa Johnson, who is the director of the National Institute of Work and Learning here at FHI 360. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tessie. Oh, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here for our Second Chances Summit and Stronger Second Chances, Stronger Communities. And I'm thrilled to have an esteemed panel alongside of me here, as well as all of you in the audience who care about second chances, live second chances, and give an opportunity for everybody here to be able to meet one another, mingle a little bit. We're going to start with the panel. I have a series of questions that I'll be asking of the panelists, and save your questions, because we'll have time at the end for whomever has a question to come up to the podium. So you can be thinking of that and teeing it up. As Tessie said, I'm the director of the National Institute for Work and Learning, and 50 years ago, NIWL was founded, and since that time, focuses on opportunities of education and workforce for youth and young adults. And with that, today really focusing on the different programming, the supports, the resources, the tools, and most importantly, the people that provide that to young people across the country. As we know, second chances are urgent, important, and as young people are reconnecting back and reintegrating into the communities, they all need love, they all need tools, they all need resources, and they need people that care about them, like our panel here, to make sure that there is a handoff in the reintegration. So young people have missed out by being behind the walls, and when they come back to the communities, we could miss out as a society, and as everybody, as neighbors, we could miss out a lot if we don't look at the assets and the talents that young people bring. So with that, I'm going to have to read a few bios. I'm really, really pleased to have Dr. Marvin Carr, who has been invested in this work with the Walmart Foundation. He is the Director of Corporate Giving at Walmart. And prior to Walmart, he served as a program officer for STEM and community engagement, and later as an evaluation officer at the Institute for Museum and Library Services. He has also served as a policy advisor to the Chief Technology Officer of the United States. So welcome, Marvin.
Okay.
And Liz Ryan has been appointed by President Biden as the Director of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Programs, OJJDP, at the Department of Justice. And prior to that, she served as the president of Youth First Initiative, which is a national campaign focused on ending the incarceration of youth by investing in alternatives. So she has an extensive career in youth justice, followed by Nicholas Alexander with the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. Nicholas is the lead performance analyst, and he has over 20 years of experience in public and nonprofit administration and community organizing. Prior to DOL, he headed Prince George's County, Maryland, just down the street, interagency reentry effort. And Deshawn, hi Deshawn, happy to have you here. Deshawn Jackson was enrolled in NCIA in May of 2022 in Baltimore, a nonprofit organization there, for HVAC training. And he grew up in Baltimore County and has navigated many challenging situations that many of our cities have. He's clearly internalized the process of seizing opportunities, and we thank him for taking a couple of hours off of work today, where he is currently an HVAC tech at NIH. So welcome. And as you can see, we have a breadth of knowledge, and I'm really pleased that philanthropy, federal government, young people, and then you in the audience that come from community-based organizations, research organizations, faith-based organizations are here around this important topic. So I'm going to start with basically the same question for each of you. And why second chances, Marvin? Why do you
I think I got sat in the wrong seat to go first, right? I think I have a little different answer, right? I think a second chance for a parent leaving prison is often a first chance for their children. I think in all of our communities, we see the impact of parental incarceration and what happens when a person leaves prison and they have difficulty regaining custody of their children, or they have difficulty finding a job. They enter into this cycle. I think it's important. Let me step back. I think most folks, most of us in this space, see the criminal justice movement along a linear spectrum, from prevention to diversion to aftercare coming out of recidivism. I think it's an insufficient lens. And philanthropic investment in that space mostly sits at the right side of that spectrum, right? Second chance hiring, bail reform, all these kind of great ideas. And I think the issue is that it's not linear, that it's cyclical. It is an intergenerational, intercommunal cycle. And if we're only focusing on stopping people from going back to jail and not investing in the opportunities to stop people from experiencing the harm of incarceration in the first place, my grandmother would say, we're just putting sugar on boo-boo. And so for me, second chance is super important because it allows for us to address the front end of the system by ensuring that we are investing in the youth and the young people who should never experience incarceration in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
And I would say, building on what Marvin is saying, one of our priorities at the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention is to open up opportunities for young people who are involved with the justice system. And we want to ensure that young people have all of the tools and resources and supports they need to grow and thrive. And prevention is critically important, so they have a first chance, and if they do make a mistake and do get into the justice system in some way, that we're helping them to move in a positive direction. So for us, it's absolutely paramount. And many of the strategies that you would employ to help a young person who's coming home from incarceration are a lot of the strategies you would also utilize to ensure a first chance as well.
Great. Thank you, Liz.
Sure. So I guess from a personal perspective, I feel like Tessie. Like, I'm a very flawed person. I need a lot of grace and have received a lot of grace and second chances myself. And so I think we get this, right, in a big way, right? Like most of our faith traditions recognize forgiveness and second chances, and not just recognize it, but emphasize it, right? That on our path to becoming our best self, right, there has to be some of that transformation. We get it in business, right? You shouldn't be afraid to fail. But in the criminal justice context, sometimes the logic, people fail to see the connection. But the data backs this up, right? It's not just a moral issue, right? But we see not only from a psychological perspective that when we forgive people, we're happier, right? Science proves this. And people will say, oh yeah, that's sure, you ate the last slice of pizza, I forgive you. But in a criminal justice context, right, people feel differently. Actually, it's true there too. Like, people don't often commit the same crime when given the right support and opportunities to grow. And I think that's what we're here for. Again, I think this is a must in terms of the economy, right? Business leaders get this, that it's about 77 million people have some type of criminal justice record, about 1 in 3 of our workers. And so it's not a question of if, but we must make sure that folks have opportunities. But it's great to know, right, as we're doing that it makes sense morally, makes us happy, and the data back it up.
I feel like second chances are like important because a lot of choices are made due to bad guidance. So, like including me, like I didn't always have the proper guidance, but when the proper guidance did step into my life, I started to make the right decisions. I made mistakes. I know everyone that here has made mistakes. So I feel like second chances are important because a lot of people make bad decisions, but it's all because of the people that are around and, bad guidance. But if you have the right guidance and the right people in your circle, you're going to prevail. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Deshaun. Could you talk, Deshaun, a little bit about challenges that you know of, that you've heard about or lived through?
Well, so as I grew up, Baltimore, I'm from Baltimore. It's not really the best city. There's a lot of temptation around, especially if you grew up in the inner city, But the challenges I faced, I learned to overcome them. It was times where I maybe, was tempted to go that route, but I always knew that if I stayed on the straight path, then, I would be good in life, So. But yeah, but it definitely was a lot of challenges and a lot of temptation around me. But I had the right person in my ear, to keep a steady path and to keep going.
So it sounds like you really take guidance from others, and in a community, the challenges we've heard about are just the people with a record. They may not have an opportunity for every job. There are conditions in certain areas that make it difficult. Is there anything there as far as challenges that you know about that you'd like the audience to know as we think about these considerations moving forward, that they get addressed?
What challenges that I personally dealt with?
No challenges just at all for what you have seen from people either returning from the justice system or challenges that might make people go into the justice system.
So like I said, I just feel like it's all about the people you're around. A bad circle can literally pull you down. It's all about the energy. So, and that's something I had to realize. But when I did realize it and I started, surrounding myself around people with goals and on the same, same mindset as me, I just went up. So,
Yeah, we heard great things about you from it.
Yeah, and literally, just going to NCIA, that definitely molded me to become the young man I am today as well. They kind of prepared me for the challenges that I may face and how the work field was going to be, and just different things. So I appreciate that as well.
Great, thank you. And Nicholas, what do you see from the Department of Labor and other places as challenges for people returning from incarceration?
Sure. So in the Employment and Training Administration, where I work in an office that deals with reentry employment opportunities. So this is our bread and butter, right? We primarily do workforce training, job training, and education. But as you said, there's a lot of challenges in addition to just getting a job, right? Having an income that can support yourself and maybe your family as well. And so folks in the audience are probably familiar with a lot of these. Housing, right? And housing affordability. It's not just in reentry, right? But in general, especially in a city like DC, getting that affordability. But in addition to that, right, there can be some discrimination, right, in terms of that process where you're applying for housing, you know, and someone sees that you have a criminal record, right? There's going to be that level of filtering out, right? And so how do we ensure that people who do have a job, right? It's not that they haven't been able to complete a training program and get a job, but they have the money, but still are unable to access that housing. So that's a problem we have to solve. Another problem that folks are familiar with is getting access to care for mental health issues, right? And substance use disorder. And so fortunately, you know, this is a recognized problem, and the system is getting more capable, more capacity, which is a wonderful thing to know in terms of decision making, right? The mental health treatment, I can speak for myself, right? Getting on that road to transformation that I sort of spoke to, right? Realizing that you make bad choices and getting some help and transforming into someone who makes better choices, right? We know that transformation needs to happen, and so getting access to that mental health treatment is going to be key. Excuse me. In addition to getting the job, I want to highlight quickly the Department of Labor and the Department of Commerce came together to work together on a good jobs policy, a good jobs initiative, and which we lay out, not just can you get a job, right? But what are the elements of that job that makes it a good job, right? So it's nothing that's going to be too much of a surprise, right? Benefits. How do you improve the recruitment and hiring process for folks who are in reentry? How do you make sure that folks have a voice on the job, right? That they're empowered to talk about working conditions, so that we're able to build the types of workplaces that folks can really feel empowered and really be able to support their families. So I encourage folks, if you haven't heard about the Good Jobs Initiative, to take a look at that. Business leaders were involved, so it's not just Department of Labor talking about what they should do. They were involved as well. But I want to come back to something that Deshaun said about having the right folks around you in terms of a challenge, right? And so I think this is true for all of us. And I think that it's important that we take that on personally, right? With 1 in 3 folks having a criminal justice record, maybe some of the people in the room, right? We want to embrace people who are in reentry rather than pushing them away. I think there's a reluctance sometimes really to get involved with people when they're recently released. But we all know in terms of getting that job, being able to support your family, that who you know, right? Who you know is going to help you get that better job. I just met somebody this morning at this event, right, who told me about some openings in the printing field. You know, printing. It's not something that you would necessarily think of when you're in 5th grade, like my son is, about I'm going to do that when I grow up, right? But it's a wonderful field, great opportunities, and if I hadn't met this gentleman here today at this event, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. Hopefully when I go to the American Job Center, my job counselor would tell me about it, but maybe not. And it's about having that network, and it takes all of us in the room, and it takes all of us in the community who care about this issue to make sure that we reach out to those folks when we're aware of them. And people in reentry are everywhere. So it's not that much of a stretch. So I just want to encourage people, take that on as a personal challenge, expand your circle, and be part of that transformation. I think, honestly, it makes you happy, and really, you can be transformed yourself. I did this work, direct service work, for a long time. I'm certainly transformed by it. That's another reason that I like second chances. I've seen people who are transformed, and to see them go on and be successful, it's a really special thing. So, sorry for going a little long there.
It was perfect, and I think you really highlight your network is your net worth in many, many instances. So, thank you, Nicholas. And for Liz and for Marvin, just to shift it a little bit, as you think about justice reform, what might that look like? What are your hopes for the future of making the justice system interactions rare and fair? Just tell us your perspective of something different. What could it look like?
Well, unless you want to jump.
No, you got it.
All right. Marvin and I have been talking a lot today about opportunities, and really it is about opportunity. And so for justice reform and juvenile justice reform, I think we want to make sure that contact with the justice system is rare. And one of the things that we talk about at the Office of Juvenile Justice is making contact with the justice system rare. And then if a young person does come into conflict with the law, that the system is fair and that the system is beneficial. And I think we have a long way to go to achieve those aspirations. But a couple of things I would just sort of building on a little of what Nick was just saying is that with our reentry supports, we have grant funding that we give out through the Second Chance Act, which is funding that systems can utilize to help young people with reentry. But that reentry needs to start right when a young person is incarcerated, not the day before they're leaving or right after they've left. That the programs that work the best are ones that start working with that young person right when they are in and out of home placement. And they're also connecting that young person with community supports and resources. So it's not just building a relationship with the people who work inside the facility, it's actually building a relationship with people who are in the community where that young person is coming from. I had the opportunity to visit one of our grantees in North Carolina, and I saw how vital it was for those young people to build those connections. So if they leave the facility on Tuesday, they are in school on Wednesday, they have a workforce plan of what they're going to do in terms of a job. And it may not be the ultimate job that they want, but it's a job that's helping them kind of on a pathway to success. But also there are a lot of other barriers and challenges, and we want to remove those barriers. We want to remove those challenges so that young person is focused on their future, and we're doing everything we can to help them with that. I'd say right now, what we hear from young people is that they face so many hurdles, it's hard to it's hard for them, and that's why the recidivism rates are so high, that when young people leave a facility, they're often coming back. So we have to break that cycle, both on the back end, where we're providing reentry, but also, I think something that Marvin was saying earlier, we have to provide those supports and services to keep young people out of the system in the first place.
I think my question builds on that. There's this thing, I think, an opportunity around data. I know we get scared of data. I'm a former Fed, so I know data scares us too. So I think just as well as Walmart can use, structured data to better inform a customer experience, just as well as a candidate for president can use data to inform the experience of their political supporters. We don't leverage data in the same way to inform people's lived experiences when it comes to the justice system. I wonder how might we, if we could find a deeply ethical and impactful way to use data to identify who are the young people what are the factors that if I knew this 7 things about a 12-year-old, that they're going to jail. If I knew these 8 environmental experiences or factors, that this young person, right, has a 95% chance of entering the JJ system or entering the adult justice system. And then how might we provide community organizations and researchers, how might we provide parents and schools with the best way to use that data to deflect them early, right? To overinvest in these young people who we know have these 7 things. There's some awesome research by the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, NICJR, David Muhammad, who also works with a lot of communities in this space, where we've recently funded them in their Youth Data Intervention Initiative. And they've identified that while most people think that the average shooter is in their early 20s, or like 17, 18, the average shooter is about 28 years old. And that there were things that 28-year-old, those 28-year-olds had in common when they were 13. And so they're working with communities to figure out what were those factors that made that shooter at 28, and how can we provide resources and connections and data in communities to help them figure out, okay, do we need to take this, this, I don't know if we need to get to the specific person, but a specific community and overinvest in those communities in these ways. So like that's one of the visions I think, as I think like a very practical input into the system, that a vision for future of justice reform looks like. And then I'll say the second part is, and this is going to sound very pitchy, but I promise you it's not pitchy, right? But I think for Walmart, like in communities where customers feel safe walking from their home to the neighborhood market, or they feel safe, walking from their car into their Sam's Club, in communities where the entire community talent profile is open to a Walmart hiring manager, Walmart thrives, but also that community thrives too, right? And so I think that that the business argument for second chances is as deep as the good thing to do argument, right? And I think we have to make that case as well. Some folks try to do it using the economic argument, but if we can prove and show, again, using data, that supporting second chances increases shareholder returns, right? Supporting second chances increases community safety, right? I just think that there's a narrative enhancement that should happen in the larger movement that, again, centers these more optimistic shareholder, stakeholder involved decisions. So hope that wasn't too pitchy, but and when I think about, like, Walmart is the largest company in revenue on the planet and the largest private employer in the country. Close to 30% of Walmart employees are under the age of 24 and under. Most of us, our first job was in retail. And so I can only imagine if business worked with state, local, and federal organizations to figure out how do we create pathways for the young people who we know are at the greatest risk of justice involvement? How do we create pathways for kids who are leaving the juvenile justice system? And in these spaces where we already know that young people's first job is probably going to be in retail, why don't we work with retailers to ensure that those second and first chances are intentional in that space? So that's the work that we're hoping to start to do at Walmart.
That's great. And that tees up to a question that I had. As far as partnerships, all of us here, we're here for this purpose around second chances. And you just identified a way to build partnership from an employer perspective. So we have employer, we have government, so you're representing your own organizations, but you're also representing yourself and your pasts and who you are as people, or who we all are as people. So one piece we could think about, what does it look like to build together? What does it look to build like with everybody here around this? And pathway was one thing that you just mentioned. Is there, from your perspective on the panel, and I'll kind of go this way, if you start with what might that look like? How could we all, if we did a call to action, and what is an element or two that it might look like for us from the angle of every community member be like to work together?
I mean, a couple things I would say from our standpoint. From ODDP, we have a lot of information about what works. We have the Model Programs Guide, which is decades of research about what works to help young people grow and thrive. And so lifting up those examples with our partners and stakeholders. And then the other really critical piece, which we have been working on ourselves, is centering directly impacted young people and their families in the work. So at ODDP, everything we do is informed by young people who've been directly impacted. We know this is something that the field has been doing for a long time, and we are embracing that and incentivizing that. And I think in all of the partnerships that we build across government, community, with nonprofits, for-profits, that we want to make sure that we're hearing from young people at the core of that, because they know what works and what doesn't work. And they're experiencing this. So for us, it's building those partnerships with young people at the core, not just as an afterthought, but like how we're modeling it here, Deshaun sharing his recommendations with us. And that's the way we want to do it. So for us, it's paramount to do it in that way.
Sure, I want to echo something that was said earlier about customer experience. I think, too often in government, there's bureaucracy and there's gatekeepers, right? And it can be difficult for folks to access the services that they need. And I'm going to get in trouble when I get home, right? But seriously, we recently put out some guidance about this. And in terms of working together and partnering, we need to reduce the difficulty of accessing the services. And this is not anything new. One-stop centers or whatever you want to call it, where you can go to one place and you can not only get help with finding the job, right, but you can get help connected to healthcare, right? You can check in with your probation officer. You can get connected to some housing services so that people aren't running all over town trying to access the services. I think if nothing else, right, that's one way that we need really to partner if we want to be successful, is making sure that our customers, which is the public, is able to access the services. I will say one other thing, which is that we're so glad that philanthropy is at the table. Being able to have that agility, right, to move quickly and to take advantage of what we find works and to implement it in a way that the private sector can do more capably than the government is able to do. That's always going to be an important partnership there.
Great. Now, I want to step out of role for 1 second there because I can't help it. But what is wonderful about philanthropy and some of the work that we're doing with young people, also funded through the federal government, is the government programs don't feed our kids. Like, we can't feed our young people who, without basic needs being taken care of first and a healthy breakfast to move on the day. So that was a gap that we see as nonprofit providers. So by bringing philanthropy in connection with those, it's a way to sort of stop some of those holes and to make sure that a young person is fully served. So I've appreciated, just by meeting all of you and working with all of you for a little bit, how you are bringing the youth to the center, you're bringing families to the center, and then finding creative ways to make a more holistic experience.
Can you ask the question again, please?
Yeah, I know, we talked a lot, didn't we, Deshaun? The question really is, how would you see, from your perspective of all of us here working together, if we wanted to make the systems different or policies different or the way that we do our work different to change an experience of somebody who might have been through the justice system?
I just feel like the way we all can help is just to provide people a steady platform. A platform is what literally builds you up. You know, if you don't have a platform and have a study plan, then you won't be able to prevail. So I feel like if we could all come together and help people actually brainstorm on a plan and what they like to do, I feel like things would be more smooth. So yeah.
Thank you. And could you talk to Sean about, you've had experience in different jobs, you went to a program for HVAC and training and other things. What are the essential pieces that anybody who's going to run a youth program, what has to be in that building or in that space? Like what is the most important thing to you when you are a participant?
Like the most important thing was just making me feel welcome, making me, it wasn't no judgment behind nothing. Everyone was family. Like we didn't look at each other a certain way because he did this or she did that. It was more so everybody looked at each other, on the same level. So if I feel like if you have a program with open arms and let people know that everything is going to be okay, I think, things are going to be okay. So
I love that. Thank you so much. And we have time for one more question but get ready for your questions because the time is coming for you. For you all that have been in youth programs yourselves or that fund youth programs, what else can you add to what Deshaun said as really being the most important, said so eloquently? What else? What are the other things that you've seen that work really well that we should make sure are always there?
I'll start. I'm still kind of reflecting on something that you shared. So he's from Baltimore. I've lived in Baltimore for a long time. Went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. And
you might have a new friend
here. Again, I was a young person who was involved in youth programming, and but for those programmings, I would not be who I am today. And I think about what is my role in the world. I often think about that. And it is, how do I make the story of Marvin Carr, right? Let me step back. Oftentimes you see to be frank, a young black boy, a young black man, like the three of us here, and the thought is they must have did something right to be able to be in this circumstance. And so, as though we are the exceptions. And so I think about my role, like how do I make the road that I've had, the journey of where I've came to, not the exception to the story, but the expected outcome. And I think that requires deep narrative change and focus on the assets that come from the community. And so I think so much of the work is focused on the deficits, so much of the solutions are too. And so that brings me to my point, and I think one of the things, you didn't exactly say this, but there is a level of love that is required in youth programming. I think you made that point by saying that. I think you meant that, right? By saying that we all looked out for each other, right? And so there's a level of love that comes between the participants and that comes from those who run the programs. But as a funder, we have to fund love. I don't think we get into that. And I don't want to get into arguing about the CFR 300, right? Which you all can do. We all get into federal guidance. But so many of our rules as funders and providers do not consider love, do not consider the fact that if you love somebody, you will give them breakfast before you take them through a day of training. And so I just think that is the sort of things that I reflect on. Where are the gaps between policy and actual success? And it is those simple moments of, I look out for her, she look out for me, and I come to a place where I can eat before I work. Super, super simple. It's not getting into the finance structure of the nonprofit, but the very basic essentials of a program.
Thank you.
Yeah, just building on everything that Marvin said, I mean, it is about meeting young people where they're at, meeting their basic needs, right? So if a young person is coming in and they need a place to live, they need food, they need something to wear to that job interview, that we need to be able to provide those supports. So we know meeting basic needs is essential. We also know that a connection with a caring adult, the research tells us that is what works. At least one caring adult in their programming, and then another thing that we see all the time is access to opportunity, right? It's not a one size fits all. Every young person isn't going to want to do a specific thing. You have to offer choices and opportunities for young people. And then, we see that when young people are involved in the development of the program, they provide input into what it is and they help with evaluation of whether it's working or not, that you see much more success with that. And so these are all sort of basic things. And things that we've known for a long time. So for me, it's about closing the gap between what we know works and what we actually do, right? Where are we actually investing the resources? We're probably investing the resources in the things that I always say what is being spent in the country to detain and incarcerate children. States and counties and cities spend about $5 billion a year, and that is the strategy that produces the worst outcomes. It actually incapacitates young people. If we could take a fraction of that resource and redirect that, or even a large portion of that resource, I would argue, because that is producing young people who are ending up in the criminal justice system. We need to help those young people to grow and thrive and redirect those resources to what we know works. All of the strategies that the research is telling us, the things that young people are telling us about what works.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. I want to echo things both that Liz and Marvin said earlier about intervening early when young people enter the system instead of waiting until sort of they're exiting a system. To be involved, and particularly in terms of job and career development. We know that these things don't happen overnight. Success doesn't happen overnight, and giving young people the time, right, to grow into their success. Marvin also talked about using data, right, to anticipate some of the challenges that they may have, right, and to target communities and specifically blocks, right, that need the most assistance and need the most support, and getting in there because the folks who live there have capacity, right? It's not that they have to have a solution brought to that block, right? But when they're involved with developing programs, as many of the justice and even one of the recent labor programs do with community violence intervention, people who are from the community, from the block, with lived experience are part of developing the program, then it's going to be more successful. I was so moved about the comment about love and about the connection to a caring adult. Man, that really hits home, I think, for many of us, right? Like when truth is spoken, right, you feel it. And I think that that's sort of the relates to the point I was trying to make about peers, right? And when somebody's recent released, not so much young folks, but adults, right, who are recently released, we might have reluctance to treat them as our peer, right, and to bring them into our network. And that's just going to always sort of maintain the status quo, right? But until we treat folks with love and respect as peers, we're going to have some of the same challenges. So I really hope to see that. And of course, with our young people as well, bringing them into our circles so that our success can be a shared success.
Great, thank you. It's time to shift to a couple of questions from the audience. And as you think about your questions too, I did want to thank Tracy Goodluck for attending with us. She's the senior advisor to Assistant Secretary Neeland in the Department of Interior. And it's been really interesting too to be able to work together and identifying community needs and the needs of our tribes and tribal nations. And Walmart helps to answer that call too. So just having everybody together and these conversations was the reason we wanted to do this panel with all of you, to continue to, if you lead with love, you dwell in the possibilities. So thank you all. And questions? Anyone have a a question for the panelists? Great. And what we're asking is if you could make your way close to the podium so that we can all hear it clearly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gordon Barrows, and I'm with Hand to Heart DC. And, or I'm also, as the Department of Justice likes to refer to me, 71689-004. You know, you talked about programming and things we can do for folks when they get out. There is a horribly tiny amount of programming for people when they are in. There is very little other than basic educational that they're forced to do. And it's funny, you also mentioned peers, peer recovery people, peer recovery specialists. If you could just talk a little bit about things that can be done so people have a running start when they get out, rather than a standstill when that gate opens, and possibly the ability of people to be meeting people who can be those support people when they get out. Thanks.
Thank you. So I am going to look towards Liz and towards Nicholas as well from your perspectives.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and you're absolutely right. We need to do a lot more for people who are behind the walls. I think one of the things that is critical for reentry, as you mentioned, is getting that running start, not at the very end of someone's time incarcerated, but right at the beginning. So we see sort of reentry programming being more successful if we start right when someone is incarcerated. That's the first thing. I think another thing is that having people who are from the community actually being part of that programming, right? So that what we hear from young people is that if they're just working with the folks who work at that facility could be 100 miles, 200 miles from where that young person lives, and you know, they could be great staff. It's just that then they're not allowed to be in touch with that young person when that young person leaves, right? So we want to make sure that people from the community where that young person is from are actually involved in the reentry planning. One of the other barriers I think that you talked about that we see is young people are often not allowed to go back to the school that they might have been removed from, right? So that's a barrier that they're facing. And so they need advocacy and support to get back into the school they wanted to go to or to get other programming. We also know that having a GED is great, and a lot of young people are able to do that while they're incarcerated. But what happens when they're going to be there for 6 more months or another year and the GED program is done, right? So I know this administration has done a lot to expand Pell Grants so that young people can actually start, if they want, community college or a four-year college from behind the walls. And so those are things that we know that can help a young person to grow and thrive. And there's many more, but those are just a few of the things that we're working on at Office of Juvenile Justice. And doing more, yes. We need to do more, absolutely. No question.
Yeah, I often reflect that if there's one good thing that came out of the pandemic, it taught all of us that we could work remotely and that we can even learn remotely, right? And a big applause to our public schools for shifting so quickly and being able to set up educational environments and strategies to reach students despite the barrier. And technology has made a lot more of this possible. And we see that in some facilities as well. I will say, you know, many of our older facilities, right, don't have that infrastructure, and jurisdiction to jurisdiction, they certainly have different rules about being able to use the internet, access the internet. But we certainly know that it's possible, right, and that may be a place for some change in the future. I can talk more about adult facilities than I can the juvenile justice ones. One thing that I know is growing and speaking to what might be possible more in the future are work release centers, right? So we've seen this where when individuals are approaching their release dates, rather than sort of being in parts of the facility that may not have access to occupational training, they are able to access that and even sometimes leave the facility, right, to go begin a job. So that way, once they are released, they actually have some work history with a particular employer. And I think that's a great model. We've seen a lot of success with it, and I think it's something that should be replicated, frankly. As Liz mentioned, the administration has taken initiative around Pell Grants. And so, not for everyone, but for a lot of folks, the money is there, right? And in terms of outside systems, our colleges, right, and our community colleges have an opportunity there, right, to reach in. And I can say, some colleges have really answered the call already. I can tell you out on the West Coast in University of California, there's some really amazing programs in place that help folks begin the process before they leave. And if I'm not mistaken, there's even a couple of cases where folks were able to get graduate degrees, right, from behind bars. It's hard enough when you're released. To do it from behind bars is incredible. And so there really are some shining examples of this. And I think the bottom line is our facilities just need to get a little bit better in terms of allowing people the access to what already is possible in many jurisdictions.
So more of a comment, not a question.
Thank you, Walter. We hear you well, though, but I was told to have people stand by the
I'm Walter Billups. I'm Executive Director of NCIA Vocational Training Center, located out of Baltimore and Charlotte. I was blessed to have Deshaun come through our training center. And I just want to say I concur with the panel because the hub is the love. Like, we're all in this together, whether we understand that or not. I mean, as human beings, we are all in this thing called life together. So when students come in, we try to let them know this is not a hierarchy. We're in this together. We have instructors that have that lived experience, that come from every aspect, so there's a sensitivity to the population. Okay, just want to talk about Deshaun real quick, because he's very humble, okay? Deshaun, we had Deshaun come back and speak to our graduate students. And then me and him stay in contact, and he called me and told me it was his birthday. And I was like, oh, wow, man, congratulations. I think he was turning 20, maybe 20 at that time. Yeah. And I was like, what are you doing for your birthday, Deshaun? He was like, Mr. Walter, I'm buying a vending machine. I was like, what are you doing for your birthday? Oh, I'm buying a vending machine. I was like, wow. Because see, one thing about the vocational training, if we don't give the financial literacy to understand the financial budget, then the job, because most our students are programmed to do this with their money, spend. There's no sense of a financial budget or financial literacy. Then Deshaun calls me and says he needs all of his transcripts of when he was in school. And I was like, all right, no problem. He was like, yeah, I'm trying to get a loan to purchase a house. Still 20 years old. I'm like, okay, Serena, my program manager, send Deshaun everything he needs. Then Deshaun, I asked him, well, you like, what area you moving in? So he gave me the address. I said, well, you know, it's a nice house. He was like, oh yeah, Mr. Walter, it's a duplex. He said, however, Mr. Walter, this house is not for me to live in. I'm purchasing this house to rent out at 20 years old. Then he sends me a picture of him at the loaning institution signing off on his paperwork. He's humble. He's not going to talk about that because Deshaun had a plan. He had a financial plan. He had a 5-year plan. Like we ask our students, where do you want to be 5 years from now? What is your plan? Because you're going to make good average wages, but what are you going to do with that money? This young man already had a plan. It was set, and he's moving in the right direction. And I'm just extremely, extremely proud to have known him and to continue to know him. Yes, sir.
Does anybody want to follow that? Bonnie, yes, please.
Hi, thank you. It's Great to meet you. My name is Bonnie Politz. I'm currently a youth and community strategy consultant, but I spent 20 years of my life at this lovely organization and ran what doesn't exist anymore, which I'm happy about actually, the Center for Youth Development and Policy Research. And so I want to go back to exactly what you were saying, and going back, Marvin, you were talking about data. And part of building this approach about positive youth development was saying sometimes we're asking all the wrong questions. We're asking about needs, when really we should be focusing on strengths. Everybody comes with strengths. I don't care what position, what time of your life, what's happened, there are strengths there. So I'm just wondering where we are systemically from both foundation, government, about embedding that in terms of any assessment that's done of young people from the very beginning, requiring programs, looking at policies. Are we really at a point where we have started to systemically change the approach that we're doing to understand more about how we build from strengths rather than trying to prevent things from getting worse? How do we build on what's working and get it better?
I can start, and the short answer is no. And I think, I'm just speaking from philanthropy, I think, and even in my time as a federal grant maker, like every federal grant that I did, and even sometimes now when I see RFPs, starts with a problem statement. So we actually are training nonprofits to center the problem in our decision making when we give money. And so I think that is how I was trained as a grant maker, and this work. But as I think back to like my approach to philanthropy is quite different than that. And it's probably because my academic background. Like my doctorate of all things is in electrical computer engineering, where the question is always how, and not why. And so like I think that framing from the engineering framing, from the systems development framing, right? Like, how do you do this, not why did you do it? I think that gets into this kind of positive framing that we have to have in the work. And so asking how instead of why totally switches, I think the chemicals your brain releases, right? Because how is this super active, imaginative state you put yourself in when you're explaining how and not why you did something. I hope that answers your question, but that's what I think one of the approaches that I hope that I'm able to influence the larger, both corporate and traditional philanthropic space as we think about youth justice and youth opportunity, is being much more focused on the systems change of this work.
Thank you. Well, we have come to the end of our formal panel, and we will be inviting folks to lunch in just a minute. But before we end, again, I want to thank all of you, and a couple of things just as recap that I heard a lot about. And Marvin, you talked a lot about first chances, prevention, and Liz, open opportunities to grow and thrive for young people. And Nick, you said, when we forgive people, we are happier. So to the point that Tessie made earlier about second chances. And for Deshawn, that person, that guidance, and the people, and that love for people that wrap their arms around you, literally and figuratively, in programming and showing you that guidance and showing the way for our young people, those really stood out to me. And some next step data. I think really interesting how you're talking about that as a vehicle and asset-based approach, even from the grant perspective. It is problem-centered, where what we do, what NIWL, FHI, and our team, the same as all of you, is start with the person in mind. And all of us here and all of you here is, what is your why? Well, your why is here because you care about making a difference and you care about people. And it's so wonderful to share space and time with a group that just has others in mind. So I thank you all. And Deshawn, you're just a rock star. We're so pleased that you were able to make the time and to take time off of work and to really share your story, your experiences. We need more of you. we need to highlight the great work that you do as an individual and all that you contribute and the asset that you are. So a special call out to you. All right. Well, thank you all very much.